हेलो शार्क्स, मैं हूं निहारिका। शार्क्स ब्रूमीज एक ऐसा टेक इनेबल्ड प्लेटफॉर्म है, आप अपने घर के लिए एक हाउस हेल्प, कुक या ऑलराउंडर बुक कर सकते हैं।
And also, like, the word of mouth spreads very fast in this industry.
True.
You know, sometimes just if you were polite enough with the customer to tell the person the right thing to do, maybe the situation would have died down there. Versus saying, you know, we're right, you can't do this, and hence
Yeah.
this, right? You're going to lose out on 10 new customers.
Right.
So the real balance is to be right while being empathetic at both ends.
Both ends.
Yeah, which is very tough. So do it yourself. And we've also, you know, gradually grown the team.
And how do you design the whole app for them?
So this is very, very interesting. Okay, we have absolutely no one we can copy in the worker
Yeah.
space. Nobody.
Yeah.
Okay, and like you said, different audience and different products work differently.
Right.
So for example, in the worker app, you've gamified the process.
Oh,
so for example, you give basic information about your profile, you're level 1 clear. If you see some training videos, you're level 2, level 3 clear. If you give an assessment, you're level 4, level 5 clear. And with every level, you're going to get more salary. So
Nice.
it's like,
Oh, nice.
okay, let me try and do it.
How do you educate the customers then? I mean, is there a conscious effort channel to educate the masses?
I remember initially we had made this comic of sorts, you know, which was like politely telling the customer that, you know, say it had stuff like, दीदी आपको 2 घंटे हो गए काम करते हुए, अब आप चाय लो, अब आप चाय पियो. You know, stuff like that. Like a customer would read and say that, मैं क्यों करूँ ये, right? But like slightly positively nudging the customer that, you know, this is how we would expect you to treat our worker. That was the first step of it. So we still give the comics to all the new customers wherever we're doing dispatches.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of CX with Chopra, where we talk about everything customer experience. And to talk about that, the guest we have today, Ms. Niharika Jain. She is the co-founder of Broomies India. It's, I would say, a very much needed, to be honest, business in today's world, where it connects households with verified and skilled domestic help. I'm going to talk a lot about customer experience in this whole space as well as we talk with Niharika. And also just to add, you guys also were featured on, not just featured, you secured funding as well on Shark Tank season 2. So congratulations on your journey.
Thank you so much, Arjun, for having me. It's a real pleasure. And yeah, we went on Shark Tank season 2, amongst other things. But
Amongst other things, I'm sure. I mean, it's like, as they say, right? Overnight success takes 10 years.
Of course.
So,
And
yeah.
I still don't think we've reached success.
But at least it's accelerated the growth, which is great. At least it has got the attention and. But interesting. I mean, just to talk about that in your business model, where you have customers, and on the other side you have domestic help, the whole labor force, where you focus on welfare of labor force as well. In context of this, customer experience has both sides.
Yeah.
Right? It's a dual thing, because typically, you know, in if you look at it from analytics standpoint, you look at CSAT scores, right? Customer satisfaction scores on NPS scores. So here you have to look at both from customer CSAT perspective and also from the labor force. So how does it whole work out? And do you feel that, you know, CX or customer experience plays a key role in this business?
I think, like you rightly said, this industry works very, very differently. And I think whoever knows a little bit about this industry is well aware of this fact. So even when we have our investors come in, ask us, new potential investors or even existing ones, we're always tracked on both ends, which is that, you know, what is your repeat rate for customers as well as for your workers? What is your retention rate? What is your NPS for both sides? And I think in this industry, if you don't have supply, and if you don't have your suppliers' trust, you are not going to be able to make your customers happy at all. And I think which is why from the very beginning, Broomies was and is a social enterprise first.
Right.
Which is that we really, really stand and believe in, dignity of these workers, fair pay, fair treatment, and standardization, which has just been completely missing in this industry of sorts.
Which is hygiene, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hygiene. It's basic
Right.
hygiene. But in India, it's bang opposite. It's basic hygiene to exploit workers in India, to be very honest,
It was
right?
going on since the Britishers, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Back then, we were the slaves.
But
and
now we are in 2024.
Yeah, we're
so
not doing
high time.
anything different.
Right.
We're still kind of, exploiting the underprivileged. And to a very, very bad extent. There are minimum wages set. People continue to not pay that. There's no leave policy as such. Of course, there's a lot of discrimination that we see in our everyday houses. Bartan alag hai khane ke, just as an example, right? So I think we started with that very clear agenda of getting this right, along with providing a lot of convenience to our customers who would employ these workers. But for both ends, we take a lot of care of things being done right. If at the end of the day a worker is not happy and we have to tell that to a customer and take a stand, we would do that even if that puts our customer NPS a little below than what it would have been. And similarly, it goes the other way as well. If a worker has done a mistake, that worker is blacklisted and we make sure that the customer is happy there. So it is a very, very difficult industry to be in. It's a very tricky balance to kind of crack. But I think that's the beauty of it. If you get it right, you're literally going to be the king of this entire space.
It's like a blue ocean strategy, which business schools they talk about, right?
Absolutely,
It is to a certain extent. But then you said if you get it right, so is it a conscious effort to design the whole customer experience, or you are looking at there are so many gaps, like you're saying? I mean, education on the customer side, basic hygiene factors to begin with, basic pay, setting those standard protocols. I mean, is it a conscious effort, or is it more of a gap you see and you're trying to fill that gap?
So I think it works both ways, So when we started building in this industry, since we are employers of workers ourselves, we knew certain gaps. So we have 3 founders, including me. I had customer acquisition. My other 2 co-founders come from NGO background, where they were trying to really put underprivileged kids back to school. So they have seen that kind of market. They knew their issues.
So they're close to reality.
Yeah, very, very close to reality. So we wanted to bridge the gap. So from the very beginning, our idea was very clear that we will standardize things to begin with, which meant that, if you go on our website today or even on day one, the salaries were always auto-calculated. There was no negotiation or haggling there. The hours were standardized for which the worker will come and work for you. And then slowly and gradually, as in when we kept servicing customers, we kept hearing feedback from both customers as well as workers. We kept filling the gap, and it is a work that is happening even today. Just as an example, every scope of work, everything is kind of standardized. It is written in the job card. If you make the worker do something extra, you are supposed to pay extra, or we will take a stand against that. Similarly, there are 3 paid leaves every month that is given to every worker that is working through Broomies, which was something that
otherwise unsaid and it's
you've
not
not
discussed,
heard of this,
and you're taken by surprise. But
yeah,
it
you're
is,
so this is, if the worker is not taking those 3 leaves, you're supposed to in cash and get that worker to pay that.
Right.
And then other things as well. So for example, if you're sending a 24 hours live-in worker, there is a contract that the customer signs which says how many rest hours are you going to give the worker.
Right.
Where is the worker going to stay? What is their accommodation going to be like? Everything. And similarly for the workers as well. Every worker goes through police verification, Aadhaar verification, background check, minimum months of contract. If you kind of breach that, then there's a penalty involved. So both sides, this is such an unorganized space. If you don't look at fully organizing it and trying to really standardize it to the maximum, you will not be able to scale. There are 10,000 agencies in the market which are doing exactly this,
Right.
but have not been able to go, say, beyond 100 workers a month. And this is exactly the reason. So that is what, we're essentially looking to completely disrupt.
Interesting, because if I simplify it, let's say for myself, so one is, I mean, from a CX standpoint, designing the whole CX so that as a customer, it's a great experience, end to end, which otherwise normally it is not.
Yeah.
One is, which I heard from you, is one is trust.
Of course.
Definitely you have that trust in the company, in the worker as well, because if, like you're saying, if I know that Broomies is doing the background verification, Aadhaar verification, training, all those things, there is a trust that whoever is coming into my household is at least to a certain level that I don't have to be worried about it. Somebody is good, bad, that's secondary. That is based on skill, competency, and all those things. So trust, you're like, that's one key role, which is interesting. And other is, I think, big role is transparency.
Of course.
Like you're saying that, we're calling it out upfront.
Yeah.
You take it or you leave it, but it's upfront. If you sign up for it, both sides, because at times, because especially I feel in your industry, it's a very gray.
It is.
More than gray, I think it's unstructured.
Unlike it is gray as well, So like you mentioned transparency. What agents do today is that, say, they'll charge 18,000 from the customer and they'll end up paying like 11, 12 or even lesser to the worker. At Broomies, we're very clear. The worker's salary is separate. We take 0 penny from it. It is given to the worker through us, of course, because there's, a proper channel. But the customer knows what they're paying for. Our charge is separate. The workers don't feel that we're, taking money away from them. It's a zero charge process for them. Otherwise, all of these things are so opaque in this industry that you can't, as a worker or as a customer, you don't know like what is the math behind.
And the worker is, in most cases, I mean, uneducated or educated, but unaware.
Very, very unaware.
Very unaware. For example, somebody coming in from any remote place to a big city, let's say like Delhi, they would obviously be overwhelmed first. And they'll probably not ask the questions, to the person who got them here.
Absolutely. So we have an office in Jharkhand, which is where we source our 24 hours workers from. We help these workers migrate safely to a metro. And there's one person who, there's an accommodation center in Jharkhand. From there, one person travels with these workers to Delhi. They really tell them as to how, say, a Western toilet looks.
Right.
They've never seen it.
Right.
Provide them with food, accommodation, basic everything, because you won't believe the number of workers who've, been told that they would get jobs and they've been brought to metro cities, and then what happens with them.
Right.
So trust is a very, very big thing. And even with customers today, if you're hiring a babysitter, you're letting someone really take care of your baby. You want absolute, whatever possible documentation there can be and whatever maximum checks there can be, you want that there.
Right.
So that's where Broomies comes in. I don't think today, if someone knows about the Broomies service and wants to hire a babysitter, would think that let me do it otherwise myself. Nobody wants to take that guilt and that risk.
Right.
So trust is a very big thing for sure.
And while doing this, I mean, of course, there are challenges. But what's the biggest challenge in this case? Is it on which front, to be honest?
On all fronts.
Yeah.
It is.
Welcome to a founder 101.
When you say challenges, I'm like, which challenge do I talk about? The 500th one? Or but on a genuine note, I think what ends up happening a lot is that either of the parties mess up, which is maybe, a worker doesn't reach on time or does something wrong at a customer's house, maybe burns food or says, I've never worked before, even though we've checked and we know that the worker has worked before.
Because anything can happen. It's not
it is a very human-centric service. Or it can be the other way, which is that, a customer, say, doesn't treat the worker right or says, I'm not going to clear the salary of the worker after a month's work. And then, of course, we get the flag for it.
True,
There are so many escalations that come, which are obviously targeted at Broomies, and this is our work, and we take full, responsibility and accountability for it. But sometimes we are dealing with the bottom of the pyramid. And it will take time to change their lives and their minds and get them to be professional. And sometimes when they don't do that, Broomies gets a lot of flack.
Correct. It's right.
A customer is paid, the customer wants that service, and they don't want to understand that this is not our fault and we've done everything right. They would never take that as an answer.
But otherwise, they were talking to a small agency guy.
Yeah, that's okay.
They'll be like, please भैया send any other.
वो भैया फोन भी नहीं उठाएंगे उनका, that's okay. वो भैया भाग जाएंगे, that's okay.
That's also okay.
And
you're ready to pay the commission again.
Yeah, that's okay. So we've discussed this multiple times that अगर Broomies नहीं होता, अगर ये worker से खुद deal कर रहे होते, तो वो worker 10 बार, even if that worker burns the food 10 times, it'd be like 11 times also they'll be like, ऐसे नहीं दीदी ऐसे करना. Here, if the worker has done something off, they'll be like, Broomies, come. We're going to take your case.
Correct.
So, but of course.
Because now you have a helpline number.
Yeah, you have a helpline number and you've paid a premium. So, I understand where customers come from. If I was a customer, I would do the same thing. But it's a very challenging industry. This is
true, because you're changing the whole thing.
Yeah.
You're changing
the equation, the
consumer behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, on one instance, businesses we talk about, or let's say in context of CX also, we say, okay, there's a particular consumer behaving pattern. You have to, as a brand, you have to understand, get consumer insights, understand the pattern and adapt according to it. Be either, let's say it's fast food, you look at taste.
Yeah.
If it's travel, you look at where people are traveling now.
Yeah.
But in your case, you're changing the behavior. You have to educate the users.
And that's very, very tough. In this world where Zomato exists and Swiggy and all these brands who give refunds like this.
Oh, yeah.
And have the deepest pockets. For us, if anything even slight goes wrong, customers like, I want a full refund. We don't have deep enough pockets to do that.
But what I like about your service is you call it out upfront.
Yeah, we're
what
very
this
clear.
Means, what the window is.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about tech, of course, in this later half, but it clearly calls out that it's for 7 days, for example, or 20 days remaining.
Yeah.
So you clearly know what the windows is. After that, it's a tech thing. Let's say that button gets disabled.
Yeah.
You've gone through that. You know what are the reasons possible. Could be before signing up.
Yeah.
So it's very, again, going back to the whole transparency. So it's very transparent. So I can't call up and say.
But people still do know, because people think that, say for example, if the app says now you've exhausted your number of replacements for whatever reasons, the person thinks, okay, let me write a LinkedIn post. The founder will see and the founder will do something about it. We have taken a very conscious call of not,
reacting, if not responding.
We respond through the channel, or we get in touch in through the DMs, etc. But we've taken a conscious call of not, violating our own terms and conditions.
So you have to qualify the complaint. If it's a qualified complaint, then you look into it. And
even if you're the minister of whatever, if you don't, if the refund is not possible as per the terms and conditions, it will not happen. No matter if the CEO says it, if I say it, whatever it is, it will not happen. Because if you're setting the wrong precedent again and again, and in this industry it can't work. Customer love or customers being customer centric doesn't mean to do this, which is what a lot of startups today do.
Right. Offer free services, free cabs. That's how Uber started.
Yeah. So we do that. So we give complimentary services. We say that, okay, we faltered. Let us give you a 15 days extension, etc., etc. But if you've misbehaved with the worker, if this has happened so many times, right? And then people say, okay, give me someone else. Boss, you've exploited 2 workers. I'm not going to give the 3rd worker to you again for exploitation.
Right.
So that doesn't happen here.
So how do you educate the customers then? I mean, is there a conscious effort channel to educate the masses? Because the reason I'm asking is because I agree with you. I mean, the whole exploitation, let's say, because if I look at over the generation, let's say kids growing up, they see, let's say, how, let's say, domestic help is treated in the house. That's how kids would learn because they're conditioned that way. It's not probably their fault when they grow up because they're conditioned that way. But now that has to change. I think to a certain extent in urban cities, it's changing. People who travel, people who have seen, people realize I mean, it's equal respect for all jobs.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very, I would still say if you look at India, it's 0.0001% who would look at like that.
Yeah.
But then how do you change? It's a social behavioral change. But so how do you deal with that?
So we've done multiple things over the years. We've experimented a lot. I remember initially we had made this comic of sorts, which was like politely telling the customer that, say it had stuff like, दीदी आपको 2 घंटे हो गए काम करते हुए अब आप लो चाय लो अब आप चाय पियो stuff like that work like a customer would read and say that मैं क्यों करूँ ये right but like to like slightly positively nudging the customer that this is how we would expect you to treat our worker. That was the first step of it. So we still give the comics to all the new customers wherever we were doing dispatches. Second thing that we did was we are very, very big on Instagram in terms of awareness. So if you see all our reels, the workers and the customers are, holding hands, dancing together, or, like that relationship which typically existed, which was of a master and a worker, is more of like a companion.
Right, because it's a family member in a way. Somebody's living with you.
Like I cannot stress this enough. Like that person is taking care of your baby, of your house, of your food, etc.
Right.
How do you treat that person as a worker and not as a companion? I don't understand. So. And a lot of families, get this bang on right. Like they are so nice to their workers that they'll take care of their kids' education, etc., everything. And you will see that those clients never ask for replacements because every worker stays at
They have
their
gratitude,
house.
empathy. I mean, you don't have to tell them.
Yeah, these guys also understand, right?
Correct.
They're not stupid, right? So Instagram is very big, where we've kind of also said like, what are the do's and the don'ts and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So those are like kind of the hard posts. And then there are friendly reels which kind of tell you that, this is our worker and we're dancing with them and, she's massaging her head and, they're having tea together.
Right.
Like, and, they're sitting together like this instead of, the worker sitting on the floor, which you've seen in a lot of households. So that is one point of change. And then the second, another thing that we do is that every booking that comes, every lead that comes, we send a brochure on WhatsApp. It's all automated. We'll of course talk about tech. But there also it's kind of explicitly written that if a worker feels discriminated in any of these ways, etc., then we have the right to forfeit your subscription or we have the right to exhaust your replacement, etc. So we tell customers enough number of times, and if they falter, suppose if it's a minor fault, we give warning 1, we're giving a replacement, but if this happens again, it's going to be a problem. If it's something big, we take a stand, and then kind of that word of mouth kind of spreads as well. And what we've also seen is customers who've been really difficult employers, they wouldn't recommend us to their friends, and then we don't get that kind of
referral or
that kind of audience, which we're very happy about.
Right.
And then customers who understand that these workers are human and we must treat them nicely and that's how it'll work, they refer us to their audience, which is exactly the kind of audience we need. So it does a good level of skimming, which is good for us.
Because it's interesting because you are educating the users. The reason I'm again talking about that is because I can draw so many parallels with other industries as well. Because post-pandemic, now things have changed dramatically from a customer expectation standpoint. Right? So for example, now my parents, they are so swift with booking a cab, going anywhere, ordering all the ration, groceries, everything through
Online.
app comes online. So they are like what probably we were 5 years, 10 years ago. So even for brands, this was change management. They had to go through that and they had to find ways because of pandemic, it happened more like a knee-jerk kind of a reaction.
Yeah.
But interesting that you are already imbibing those things in your growth because then it'll be easier for you to have, let's say, any new wave, any new change comes, so you would know that how to educate the users or how to influence those behaviors, because some of the brands had to learn it the hard way. For example, I mean, nowadays banks are not competing with banks. Probably they're competing with an Amazon on customer experience.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, on my phone in the same hour, I will use a Zomato, Uber, Amazon. I mean, all these, or Instagram. All these at the same time. My expectation from all these
Are very, very high.
are very, very high and almost similar. I can't now. I mean, nowadays you can't say that, oh, it's a banking app, so it can be slow, or oh, it's this, so it's no, it has to be that. So end of the day, they had to change themselves or educate the users that there are new ways of dealing with it. I'm sure when let's say if metaverse becomes a thing in the future, again the change management, educating the users, and that's where I feel it's still, if I can say metaverse failed, is maybe because of that, because they did not really educate the users what this new thing is going to be like.
I think it's also a factor of what is the right time to enter a space. You know, like, say for example, multiple companies have tried to do what Broomies did, say 10 years back, which I feel was not the right time, where the users weren't ready enough, not employers, but workers. You know, there's no internet, there was no geo, let's say, and cheap internet wasn't available. Very less smartphones existed with this class of people. And what that did was that their entire supply acquisition failed because it wouldn't happen at that mass level. For us, we are a COVID-born startup. We started in 2020. So we had to be very, very agile with these steps. And, you know, you slightly mentioned about, of course, the new ways of doing things. For us, that's every day at Broomies. And, you know, with customers, you say, for example, you know how a Swiggy is dealing with customers and say that's the best way to deal with it. A Broomies can copy it, right? That's easy. That's what banks are doing. That's what you said. All startups are trying to do, or other businesses are trying to do. What we are really trying to change is the worker side of it, because that is something that nobody's been able to do.
Right.
So we are real disruptors there. I'll give you a couple of examples. So for example, you know, when COVID had not started, like it was just the onset of it, when we could still step out, we would go like basti to onboard new workers, right? And though that gave us a lot of insights and it was absolutely needed, it could not have been the way of acquiring workers in the long run. So we built a worker app, we built an agent app, which our competitors had not done, even being in the business for 7-8 years. Then we started marketing these apps on, you know, MX, Tuck and TikTok back then. YouTube, which got us, you know, a lot of worker love on these apps. And now every day it's a disruption. So for example, you know, I have 4 people who take assessments in one city for all workers. Now there's something called an AI assessment that we've built.
Interesting.
Which has like random set of questions which we have designed. And every worker goes through that. It is way more objective than what my assessment person would have done. It grades the workers. This entire AI assessment can be taken on the worker app from anywhere in the world. If you speak in Kannada, the person replies in Kannada.
Wow.
And it's like, you know, completely, it's giving me 95% cheaper result with, you know, 50% say more accuracy than what I would have gotten from a physical assessment. And this is something that nobody's been able to say solve for the blue collar workforce space.
Right.
So we're building in inventions here, which will help us really, really scale faster. And this is just one example, say, of assessments. And there are multiple, say, for onboarding, for police verification, how will the worker reach the customer space? So a lot of pain points. But how do you really solve them for workers is our everyday challenge. And of course, while copying best practices from great startups in the customer space as well. So
But no, it's a great AI real life example. I mean, everybody is talking about AI. I mean, I think I have to say AI 3 times to get the clicks nowadays. But it's a great real life example of AI, that how it's been used.
Yeah.
But again, talking about technology, it has been a game changer for you, right? Like you're saying, it's been the differentiator, both in terms of CX and enabling you to go reach the scale. Otherwise, I'm sure it wouldn't have been possible.
So thankfully, we've had the best team to solve for tech from the very beginning, and they happened to be friends first, and then they came on board, etc.
Even your two co-founders are also have
But
a
the
tech
mechanical
background.
engineers, not coders. But my CEO, Vaibhav, he heads the product part of it. And the CTO is under him. And he always has had a very, very clear focus on being a very lean model. So if he sees that a team has crossed 20 people, he comes to the room with the CTO and he says, बस 20 लोग क्या कर रहे हैं इस process में? You know, how do we like cut this thing down? And that has saved us through so many, so many of those times when we had less money, we had cash crunch, and we didn't know like how to service so many people in such less cost. Tech has always been the solution for us. So as a company, because of the CEO, I had very little idea about this in the very beginning. Now it is in everybody's DNA.
Right.
The 3 founders and the leadership team, we figure out an issue and we figure out how to do this, not manually, but through technology. So for example...
So that's always the first approach.
Yeah, that's the first approach. And that's also something that, helped us raise investment also whether it was...
Because it's scalable as well, right?
Yeah.
Easy to standardize.
This entire industry has not been cracked till now because of technology. Because people have, done this manually, and we did this for the first 3-4 months, where, if you give one worker, you earn 30,000 on a full-time worker. It's easy money.
Right.
So you don't want to focus on tech. You'll be like, अरे मैं ऐसे 1000 वर्कर दूंगा month में, मेरा तो ऐसे ही बहुत सारा,
Correct.
3 crore का business मेरा ऐसे ही हो जाएगा.
Right.
Why should I do anything else? But the point is that as you scale, you realize that in this industry, technology is the only key. You cannot manage so many people without a very complex, good, sorted technology
Platform.
system. Yeah. So, like I said, we have a worker app. We have an agent app where you and I could refer workers, which helps us build a supply pipeline. All of these.
That's interesting, because that's also the third.
Yeah, so that's the third
party.
product, which usually people introduce very, very late into their journeys. And all of these apps are available in...
So we're not saying those agents, it's a threat to you. You come on board and it
you
becomes an
earn money,
ecosystem.
come.
Right. It's a platform.
It's a platform.
You use the platform to your advantage.
Yeah, so we've created micro-entrepreneurs. So for example, security guards today could be our agents.
True.
And earn 7,000-8,000 rupees extra bucks per month. Just as additional income, just by referring workers.
Which they're anyways doing.
Which they're anyways
If you look at the
doing.
societies and everything.
Yeah. So instead of going on the field and acquiring workers, we go on the field and acquire agents. We show them the agent app, we tell them about the agent app, and then they help us get workers.
But one thing I'm very intrigued about is how do you design that? So what goes behind that product design? Because I spoke to one of my guests in the past that, I mean, if you look at the retail space, everybody is running after the Google way of doing things, having a clean one-click checkout and everything. But he also spoke about that you also have to understand what business you are and who are your customer. Let's say if I'm buying a Gucci jacket worth $2,000, I don't want it in one click.
Yeah.
I would want to rather read about it and see, spend time on it, and then buy. So the experience should be in a way that it gives me that option to immerse or engage with the brand, understand, read about it. Because in your case, the user is on the other side of the spectrum is the worker. So, and how do you design the whole app for them?
So this is very, very interesting. Okay. We have absolutely no one we can copy in the worker space. Nobody. Okay. And like you said, different audience and different products work differently.
Right.
So for example, in the worker app, we've gamified the process. So for example, you give basic information about your profile, your level 1 clear. If you see some training videos, you're level 2, level 3 clear. If you give an assessment, you're level 4, level 5 clear. And with every level, you're going to get more salary. So it's like,
nice.
okay, let me try and do it, right? Like I want to get more salary.
Nice way to upskill them as well, right?
Yeah,
It's
nice
like,
way to. Otherwise, if you tell them कि देखना है तभी job मिलेगी, I think you have a very big
tell me
dropout.
do 10 certification and get a job, I'll never do it.
Yeah, you'll never do
it's
it.
all we've been my
you'll
to-do
be like
list.
नहीं करना है मेरे को. So from day one you'll be able to see jobs. We'll say अच्छा ठीक है आपने इतना किया है, ये job आपको दिख रही है, मिल रही है.
Right.
आप इतना और करो, आपको इतना और मिल जाएगा, right? So it's a good way of gamifying. Similarly, what we also did was that this is in pipeline, but you see that these workers send a lot of these forward messages. Good morning, Bhagwan ji messages and stuff like that. So we're going to build templates of those sorts on our app. You use our app to send these forward messages.
Interesting.
Now, this is something which is very, very basic.
No, but cracking that whole customer psychology.
But cracking community for these
Community
workers
building,
is very, very important. Otherwise, why will these workers remain on the app? So this is one small example. But
No, it's a great example. That's how the whole micro loans in the financial sector started, because they understand that how, let's say in a village setup, giving a loan, what does it mean for the community, that they would always come back and pay, because it's about, what will other people say? So I have to go and pay back. Or, I mean, all these things. So it's very interesting to understand, because nobody, like you're saying, nobody has tapped that part of the market.
Yeah, they haven't. And it's extremely important for this sector, because there are 90 million domestic workers in India. That's such a big number, right?
Wow.
And we are not even on the tip of the iceberg. We're nowhere when it comes to how much penetration we've been able to do.
Because right now you're standardizing in India, but there's a big international market as well.
In India itself, 90 million, right? Internationally, this is
if you
a
look at the
very, very big scope.
Because if you look at the avenues for these people, I mean, there's a scope to go to Singapore, where they have nice, clear guidelines of how you can get a worker.
You look at Japan. Elderly care is going to be such a problem there. Everyone's wanting to pay 70,000-80,000 to a helper there who can just be with them as a companion.
Yeah.
Right? So there's immense scope. But you'll be only able to, tap on that scope if you're able to really build a community of these workers and get them to know about you. So we really try and make viral videos on YouTube for these workers, have a lot of these awareness centers, have a lot of these referrals. And of course, we build 10 things, one thing works, 9 things will fail, because we don't have a precedent. We don't have anybody to kind of see and copy.
But that's the fun part also.
Yeah,
it's like keep experimenting.
Fun and come on, disappointing also, because you spend so many hours, and this is not my work, because I
I'm
do
sure the team needs a
customers.
lot of motivation.
Yeah, so my chief operating officer, who's my co-founder, Saurav, I think it's a real nightmare for him.
I'm sure.
Because
on one side you're listening to all the you have to handle complaints, which is all negative energy in the sense that you have to handle, be sensitive.
Yeah.
And other side, you're trying new things.
You're trying new things, and some of them have worked beautifully. And then some of them, you think, and everybody believes that this is going to work for sure, 100%, and then it doesn't. So, but of course, that's the founder journey.
Right, I'm sure.
And I think if you get that one thing right, and sometimes just one intervention leads you to a 10x growth. So,
But you also consciously look at some of the trends, mega trends which are happening. For example, aging population.
Yeah.
Because I was reading through, very interesting is that one of the biggest concerns in the world is declining population.
So is it for India?
Even Elon Musk talked about it. I was surprised. But then when I looked at, let's say, fertility rates of Europe, US, they're actually declining.
So is India's.
So is India's, to be honest, yes. And the pyramid is not how it should be in terms of...
So if you actually see for India, data-wise, the current population, if it needs to be replaced with the same number of people, only 5 states are above that fertility rate. Only 5. Wow. Which is UP, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Meghalaya, Manipur, and one more. That's it. Everyone else is below.
It's actually declining so aging population.
It is
which means there's going to be a new segment, let's say 10 years down the line, or even now for that matter.
Even now. So I always believe, and I've been told by multiple of my friends, advisors, mentors, that this is a sunrise sector. And if you stay put
Right.
for another 10, 15 years, internationally, of course, there's a very, very big scope.
True.
But even within India, you see that the old age population today may not be wanting to spend that much. But when people like you and I grow old, we are definitely like, putting in money to keep ourselves happy. And if you look at the younger population, nobody wants to move an inch and do things themselves.
Yeah. Imagine
We're-
Gen Z, Gen Alpha, yeah.
We're not copying the West there. We're not getting a robot and saying that, please clean
Right.
my. Yeah, that's not happening.
Right.
We're employing more and more workers to get convenience. So both ways, this is a very booming sector. And I always tell this to VCs, right? Like they're crazy right now about SaaS and crypto and AI and whatnot.
Right.
But just imagine, like, of course, there's a lot of scope there. But my founders and I always say this, that, we wanted to build Broomies because we could be doing like really great things at work, at crypto, for whatever. And if we come back home and if we don't have a decent meal cooked for us, it's pointless for us.
True.
So we always wanted to solve for something which was very essential. So we're not creating a market. We're creating standards in a market which has existed for decades. So, and it is only going to increase. So I feel we're kind of sitting on a gold mine. And if you do it right, you could play a lot of gold.
Right. True. And also this whole gig economy coming up, right? Everybody wants to do a gig and then come out of it. And I'm sure even in the even in the corporate sector, as we see, I mean, for example, if you look at Europe, people prefer to work as a contractor than a full time, because they're like, okay, I'll work for 4 months, probably I'll earn equal amount for the year, and then I just want to spend time on myself. And I see that changing in the corporate side as well. In the next coming few years, people would prefer to do gigs and come out. But now, especially now, like you're saying, for the workforce, the domestic help, since you're gamifying, doing things, I think that is also going to change. They would want to do gigs. Somebody would just want to do 3-month cooking, do somewhere. So that also, I think, is going to be a very big economy.
So, very frankly, two parts to it. One is the on-demand service, which is that your cook is not come today, you want someone else to come and cook for you. That's not Broomies' thesis. We personally think that that's not going to work because, you order from a Zomato for a day or two. If someone's not come, you don't want to give your baby to a stranger if the babysitter is not
letting somebody
come.
in your environment house.
So I feel gig or on demand has worked beautifully for, again, delivery apps or last mile delivery or Uber, Ola, etc. But will not work for an industry like Broomies. Second is, like you rightly said, people would want to do 3 months, 6 months. But we're really trying to change it the other way, which is to say that you do say 3 months of house help if you don't know much of other skills. You think you've aced that, you start helping in the kitchen. You think you've become a cook of sorts, let me get you a cooking job, let me increase your salary. You think you can do cooking and cleaning both, let me get you an all-rounder job. I'll get you even more salary. We want our workers to have that trajectory and eventually move out of the system after a year or two. Or be placed at H&I clients where you get, higher salaries, or eventually then move abroad if you're okay with, then, earn incremental salaries. We've had multiple workers who've gone through this journey and have cracked government exam and are now, there. So, would always want that kind of trajectory versus saying 3 महीने के लिए immediate पैसे चाहिए और फिर जाना है, because that's not what customers would want. Usually all customers would say that, okay, I'm okay with a 10% increase per year in their salaries, but I want to retain the same person. I don't want to keep training, etc. So with all workers, we have a minimum for full-time, we have a 3 months contract. For part-time, we have a 6 months contract. Anything below, we don't want to do. because you're putting in significant amount of money in assessing, training, verifying these workers, and we need that ROI to come through.
Of course.
For a minimum tenure. So yeah, that about this industry, it works slightly, I think, different than the others.
No, interesting and just great conversation, very insightful. Just last question, I just want to ask that, and for the upcoming young professionals, I know you go and speak to a lot of not kids. I don't know if we can call them kids.
College students.
College
and
students.
Aspiring
You go
founders.
Aspiring founders. You go at events as well. So from a CX standpoint, so what are the things, because you focus on customer acquisition, right? So which means you have to understand what's the pulse of the customer.
Yeah.
Again, making sure you're balancing everything, and then transparent, trust, all those things. So what are some of the tips that you would want to give, like if if let's say somebody is a young aspiring entrepreneur or getting into this field, so to get to that, to ace that customer experience, which will reflect in your customer acquisition, and like you're saying, some of the things you've done probably at a much lower cost because you understand the pulse of the people. So what would be those tips that you would want them to?
I think I'm also somewhere navigating through this, and it's an everyday struggle. But I feel empathy is really, really needed, at least for this sector, and for others as well, of course. And speaking to the customer the right way has helped us immensely. And this is something that I'm actively trying my team also to understand and learn. Initially we did all the talking with all our customers. We handled all their escalations, and never did we feel that customers were angry or weren't able to understand our point, which is what we're starting to see now with my team. Right? So that DNA needs to be stronger. That, even if the customer's faltered, everything's happened, the customer is absolutely wrong, there still needs to be a certain level of empathy flowing in from top to bottom to be able to deal with the situation, because here situations go awfully wrong in the wrong direction. So I think empathy is very, very important, and I think someone who's starting out in this space must do things themselves first. So we did it. I still speak to my customers. If somebody's reached out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, I will always reply. I will always solve the issue. The day you stop doing that is the day you will absolutely, you will not know what's happening. And we have, this happened a little late because of course it was cost heavy, but we audit all calls are recorded on every end. And those retrainings keep happening. But it's very, very, very important to be empathetic in all your conversations, whether it is worker, customer. You can really solve for a situation if you do that. And if you're not that, it can blow up on social media, it can blow up anywhere. And it has blown up for us also.
And listen to you from what you're planning to do, achieve. The higher motto in the sense.
Yeah. And also, like, the word of mouth spreads very fast in this industry.
True.
Sometimes just if you were polite enough with the customer to tell the person the right thing to do, maybe the situation would have died down there, versus saying, we're right, you can't do this, and hence this, right, you're going to lose out on 10 new customers.
Right.
So the real balance is to be right while being empathetic at both ends. Yeah, which is very tough. So do it yourself. And we've also, gradually grown the team, but this is one piece which I am also continuously working on with all my team members.
Awesome. I mean, thank you so much for, great insights, the conversation, loved it. And thank you for joining the show. And,
it was absolutely my pleasure.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for listening in, and do like, subscribe, share to keep watching more episodes. Thank you.